Leeds International School, Form 1, first midterm, English Literature, and the lesson is Introducing Literary Techniques. Learning Outcomes. After this lesson, students will be able to define and describe different literary devices, explain why and how literary devices are used in text, identify literary devices in text samples. Finally, students will explore the common literary devices found in poetry and prose. Okay children, first one is figurative language. Figurative language is language that is not meant to be taken literally or word for word. And also it stirs up your imagination and makes you see things more clearly. Right? So it's simply the color we see to amplify our writing. So figurative language is very important in poetry and prose. Simile. Similes are comparisons between two dissimilar things that we use the words like or as. Now here I have given you some examples. Angry eyes and nuclear explosion. Now these are two words. Now first of all you can see the words are dissimilar, not similar. So the girl's eyes was compared to a nuclear explosions. So that is called as a simile. Her hair is like a waterfall. My tummy growled like an angry lion. My tummy growled as if a lion was inside me. Yes, my dear children, what do you mean by a metaphor? Metaphors are comparisons between two dissimilar things that do not use the words like or as. Now, in the previous slide, I explained about the simile. Yes, in simile you have studied about we have to use or we have to compare something with the words like or as. Here, we do not use the words like or as. At the same time, that is also a comparison. Now for an example, the moon was a lantern lightning in the night sky. So, night sky is very beautiful and the moon is compared to a lantern. So, there's a comparison. But exactly that is not a simile. You should remember it very well. I'm a peanut butter and my best friend is jelly. Can you think of one? Hyperbole. Hyperbole uses extravagant exaggeration to make a point. For an example, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. But really, can we eat a horse? No, but we used to say like that to show our hunger. I tried the math problem 1,000 times. Yes, the person is going to solve the maths problem many times. So, in hyperbole, we are going to tell it like this. So, your turn to think a sentence. Personification. Personification gives human qualities to non-human things, such as nature, animals, objects, or feelings. For an example, the leaves danced in the wind. Yes, that is a nature fact. But when we read this sentence, we feel like the leaves are alive. So that is personification. The smell of the coffee called my name. The coffee is personified. Other literary devices. Allusion. An allusion is a reference to a person, place, event or literary work that a writer expects the reader to recognize and understand. It may come from history, geography, literature, art, music or religion. For an example, How could you be so Dr. Evil? Canyon West, heartless. Now, illusion means it's simply an indirect or passing reference. Now you can say, children, how could you be so Dr. Evil? Now this is an indirect dialogue. So there's a hidden meaning in it. So it may come from different subjects. Symbol. A symbol is an object, person, place or action that has a meaning in itself, and that also stands for something larger than itself. Now if you read poems or stories, you may come across different symbols. For an example, a dove symbolizes peace. Yes, it's a good sign. A black crow or raven symbolizes death. A wedding ring symbolizes what? Yes, time to guess. So, symbol is a good sign of understanding a poem or a particular story. So, there are so many symbols inside a poem or a story. The next category is sound devices. Some literary devices focus on the sound of words rather than their meaning. So we divided that into two parts. The first one is figurative language that may come across prose. Literary devices we used to come across in poetry. In the next slides, I am going to explain in detail. So under figurative language and literary devices, repetition is very important. Repetition is when an author repeats a word, phrase, a sentence or stanza for effect or emphasis. Now you can see in your poems, maybe stories, you may come across some words more than one time. So that is called repetition. For an example, the chorus or refrain of any song you may have heard. There can be so many repetition or repeated words. Rhyme. Rhyme is the repetition of end sounds in two or more words or phrases that appear close to each other in a poem. For an example, now here you can see a stanza. Let's read it. All day the gusty north wind bore, the loosening drift its breath before, low circling round its southern zone. The sun through dazzling snow mist shone. Now here, what are the rhyming words you may come across? So here in red color, I highlighted one set. Bore, before. Same pronunciation. Zone, shone. Same pronunciation. So that is we called as a rhyme in a poem. Alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of a sound at the beginning of words. Have you heard of tongue twisters? So I am going to recite one. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where is the peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? Now in this sentence, you may come across the letter P. So letter P is repeated in the beginning of the words. So it is called as alliteration in simply. So other common examples I can give you. Coca-Cola, CC is gonna repeat, and Tiny Tim, TT is repeated, and Mickey Mouse. So can you think of any you have heard? The next one is onomatopoeia. Another name for onomatopoeia is audible imagery. Onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like the sound it makes. So there are so many words for onomatopoeia. Inside poetry and inside prose, you may come across such words. For example, boom, crash, wow, zap, pow, oops, bang are some of them. And here also I have given you pop, crackle, screech, zip, whiz are some of them. So, in short and sweet, what do you mean by onomatopoeia? Is just sound. The next one is assonance. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. So actually that's not a rhyme. So in other words, we can tell like this. Now assonance is a resemblance of sound between syllables of nearby words, arising particularly from the rhyming of two or more stressed vowels, but not consonants. Now for example, the words like sonnet, porridge are some of them. But also from the use of identical consonants with different vowels. For an example, killed, cold and culled. So the use of assonance throughout the poem creates the sound of chest prayer. That's just a hint. So here I have given you an example. The cane, the drone of a boat in the cove. So here the letter O is repeated in two places. Consonants. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds at the end or middle of words. So that is also not rhyming. Now for an example, the little bitty ant crawled across the field. Now here the word little, so the consonant sounds are in the middle of the word. And bitty is also like that. The double T contains in the middle of the word. So that is we called as consonants in poetry or prose. Other important poetry vocabulary. The first one is tone. What do you mean by a tone? Yes. Tone is the writer's attitude towards a subject, character or audience and is conveyed through the author's choice of diction, imagery, figurative language, details and syntax. So I can give you some words that can describe the tone. Okay? Happy, excited, angry, threatening, agitated, thoughtful, worried and depressed. So if you read a poem, first thing is you have to consider about the tone. Okay, we'll move to the second one. Imagery. Imagery. There are a lot of imageries. So we can divide into two parts, visual imagery and audible imagery. The things we see and the things we hear. Imagery consists of words or phrases that the writer uses to represent persons, object, actions, feelings and ideas descriptively. For an example, we walked into the pitch black room that reeked of death, and as we flicked on the light, we heard a blood-curdling scream. So that is really a visual imagination. That is a good visual imagination. So we feel very scared. Okay, the next one is theme. Theme is the central message of a literary work or the idea of the author wishes to convey about that subject. It is not the same as the subject which can be expressed in one or two words. Now I can give you some possible themes. Okay, the first one is not all kids who are in gangs are bad. If you read a story, right, if it's about children or bad kids, right, the possible theme will be this. And another one, if something bad happens to someone, do not blame it on yourself if it's not really your fault. That is also a possible theme. So theme is a central message in a poem or a story. Alright. Then next we'll move on to the stanza. Yes. What do you mean by a stanza? The stanza is a group of related words in a poem, similar to a paragraph of prose but does not have to complete sentences. It's like a poetry paragraph. So stanza is like a poetry paragraph. Now this is a good example to show stanzas for you. Now the poem is Beth Gelert. Now here you can see this one as a first stanza. Right? That day Llewellyn little loved the chase of heart and hair, and scant and small the booty proved, for Gelert was not there. So completely these lines we can take it as stanza. First stanza and stanza 2 and stanza 3. Today this is the summary of the lesson. Right? Today I introduced you some of the literary devices. So we learnt about a figurative language, right? A figurative language come across in prose and poetry. And what do you mean by a simile? Simile is a comparison between like or as, and metaphor is also comparison but without the words like or as, right? Assonance is all about the vowel sounds in a sentence or a phrase, right? So the theme is a general or a central message, right? So rhyming words are the words which are rhymed together, and auditory imagery, the things that you can hear, so it's we called as onomatopoeia also. The consonant means the repetition of consonant sounds in a sentence, right? Allusion means a deep message that conveys you a different meaning. And personification gives you human qualities to non-living things, right? And we also learnt about alliteration. Yes, what do you mean by alliteration? Alliteration means the repetition of consonant sounds. And repetition is just repeating of words or phrases inside a story or a poem. So this is the summary of today's lesson. Practice. Identify the figurative language in each sentence. This is a homework for you. The first one, the children were angels when they are singing. You have to identify the figurative language here. I love eating chocolate chip cookies. Her eyes were burning coals glistening in the dark night. The precocious girl popped her gum loudly. The smell of the pasta called my name. Her hair was as soft as silk. I called you 1,000,000 times last night. My head hurt so bad that it might explode. After the boy threw it, the rock tap danced its way across the lake. The purple moor looks beautiful and fascinating. Thank you very much for listening to the lesson. Have a nice day.